Welcome back. Now, the last time we had a conversation about leases. Today we want to talk about tenancy, and I have Wakili Mogane here with me who will give us more insights and information. Wakili, as always, karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
You can start by defining for me who a tenant is.
A tenant is anyone who has taken for rent somebody else's a house or space for a period of specific period of time.
Now, what are some of the rights and the obligations of a tenant?
Tenants are entitled to a specific or to numerous rights, and of course, as we say in law, that rights must always be accompanied by obligations. One of the rights that a tenant is entitled to is something we call quiet enjoyment. So I've taken your space or your premises, and because I'm paying rent, I must be allowed to have to enjoy what I have rented from you quietly, so you will not interfere with my tenancy as my landlord. So that is one of the rights. And the other right that I have is for me to use or to live in a place that is habitable. So you will make sure all the conditions are right for me to have a good habitable working or residential place. That is also something else that I have as a right. In terms of obligations, I have obligations to my landlord to paying rent and on time. So whatever we have agreed that will be obligations or the rented amount that I need to be paying to you, I must be paying, and consistently so, on time and without delay. Other obligations I have is to make sure that the premises that I've rented is maintained in a way that I do not destroy that which is my landlord's.
A lot of the times, tenants think they're the ones who have rights, but also the landlords do have rights. Maybe you can define for us what are some of the rights and obligations also of landlords.
The landlord also has numerous rights. One of them is to receive rent. Remember, this is a transaction between the tenant and the landlord, where the tenant gets premises for a fee or at a fee. So the right that the landlord will have is to receive the rent and on time. The landlord also has obligations towards the tenant, and the part of those obligations is to make sure that they are renting out the premises, or they are maintaining the premises for rent in a habitable way, in a clean and good environment that is rentable to the tenant. So I do not only receive rent, but I also make sure that I maintain those premises in the standards that are allowed by the law, but also making sure that my tenant is comfortable.
And we have security deposits. Maybe define for us, what is a security deposit when it comes to tenancy?
That is a hot topic, very, very heated, because a security deposit is actually meant to be that security deposit. So what many landlords normally do is that they think that they are entitled to the security deposit basically because the tenant is occupying their space. But a security deposit is that amount of money that is deposited with the landlord to make sure that at the end of the tenancy, if the tenant is exiting the premises, they must make sure that they give back the premises in the conditions they were when they were taking the tenancy. So the security deposit makes sure that if there is any destruction of the rented premises and the tenant has failed, obviously, to make good, then that amount of money is the one that is going to be used to rectify those defects that the tenant has occasioned in the duration they were in the premises. So it is merely a security deposit. So, but also remember, who is the owner of the security deposit, as it were? It is the tenant, only that it is deposited with the landlord for use as a security and nothing more than that.
Yeah, and there's a process, of course, of giving it back to the tenant.
Yes.
What is the process?
If I am exiting the premises at the lapse of the tenancy, and I have either not occasioned any defects on the premises, or I have made good. For instance, I've repainted the walls, or any broken panels and everything I have been able to rectify, then I'm entitled to receive back my security deposit. In most cases, you find that that particular amount of money is supposed to come back to me, or to revert back to me from the landlord within 30 days. But it can be specified expressly in a tenancy agreement. So in cases where, for instance, I am required to deposit 2 months or 3 months security deposit, then that has to be returned back to me within a reasonable time frame after my exit as a tenant.
We are forever hearing about conflict between the tenant and the landlord. What are some of the dispute resolution options that we have we can all run to?
As lawyers, and what we have tried to do is to avoid litigation at all costs. And so as we draft lease agreements, we normally put clauses on mediation or other forms of alternative dispute mechanisms. But that may not always carry the day at the end of the day. So if we are not able to agree through a mediation, we may end up going for an arbitration or litigation. In litigation, I mean we take each other to court depending on who the aggrieved party is. In this case, where we are dealing with residential premises, then you go to the rent restriction tribunal. Obviously, it has its limits in terms of jurisdiction, in terms of how much rent you are paying and so on and so forth. But also, if it's a business premises, then what is available to you is the business premises and rent tribunal. So you go there through an advocate or not, but also it is advisable that you engage a lawyer or an advocate to take you through that whole process, because that litigation process definitely does not end there. If you're not happy with the decision of either of these tribunals, then you can appeal to the regular court.
Basi tupatie advice kama wakili, because we're always fighting with our landlords and tenants.
My advice is to both the landlords and the tenants, and I'll start with the tenants because they most likely get the brunt of it. It is very, very advisable that when you're entering into a tenancy agreement, you make sure that there is a documentation. In terms, you enter into an agreement that is binding between you and your landlord. But also, number two, make sure that you have a checklist of what the premises has in terms of, was it, how good was it when it was being handed over to you, so that you will have something to look back to when you're exiting and saying that, I mean, this panel was broken when I got in, so it is not my responsibility to to rectify it, or one or two things. So the advice we have for tenants is to make sure that they are living within the provisions of the agreement that they had with the landlord. They are also making sure that they are keeping good or complying with those provisions. For instance, paying rent on time to avoid being distressed for rent. For landlords, make sure that you also do your due diligence on that kind of tenant that you're going to allow to your premises. Some tenants are very problematic, and it is also very good to know the kind of person you have. But also do not allow your rent to accumulate over a period of time, because then that is a recipe also for litigation processes that are unintended and unnecessary.
Fantastic. As usual, your insights are appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we've had it. Tenants, always make sure you have a binding document. And landlords, ensure that you know who is living in your house. At least that is my takeout for today. Let me take a short break. I'll be back with Pambo.